The baby shower became quiet as his sister got up to declare that baby would destroy brother's life. "She's simply protective," my spouse moaned. I grabbed a folder and handed it over to him. "You should then wish to check what she has been doing behind your back." As he turned over the first page, his sister's face became white. I never thought my baby shower would become a full-fledged fiasco. It was meant to be a celebration, wonderful food, laughing, and people who loved us gathering before Paul, my husband, and I had our first child. Rather, it became the turning point everything broke apart. It went beyond a nasty remark. It wasn't just a sister who was too protective playing a nasty prank. Elena stepped up and screamed those words in front of everyone. "That baby is going to destroy my brother's life." It was something deeper, something terrible. I'm not clear if she wanted everyone to nod along. Perhaps she assumed Paul would share her opinion, or that I would weep and go. Still, the room became very quiet. People froze midway through a mouthful. Glasses halted halfway to their lips. My mother, who had spent weeks organizing the shower, gazed at Elena like she had sprouted horns. My closest friend looked absolutely shocked. I looked at Paul, expecting him to speak. He groaned, massaged his temples, and mumbled, "She is simply protective." Shielding? That was not protective. That was rather ridiculous. Not yet, however. I didn't respond. Knowing what he lacked, I was able to. Elena had just delivered the perfect occasion to me. I had been waiting for it. I pulled a folder from within my purse, slid it over the table to show my spouse. "Then you'll want to find out what she's been doing behind your back." Elena's cheeks turned white at that. I tried, even though Elena and I were never close. I did indeed. She became fixated with Paul in a manner that seemed out of line for a sister. She spoke strange things constantly. "You know him not as I do. Always the golden kid is he." Simply said, "I want him not to settle." Relax, like I was in a downgrade, like our infant served as an anchor. She did not congrats me when I became pregnant. Not a hug, no smile, nothing. She seemed bored instead. That ought to have raised questions. Little things began to happen then. My prenatal visits were often canceled. They would say, "Well, you canceled last week," when I would phone to confirm. I hadn't, however. My work emails started to include strange notes. Emails from me declaring I was thinking about leaving were reaching colleagues. Paul's manager made hints that someone had told him about Paul's upcoming financial difficulties related to the kid. I initially assumed I was seeing things. Pregnancy, brain, tension, whatever, but I began to observe then, and what I discovered gave my skin crawlers. First concrete evidence came from my doctor's office. One of the receptionists let it slip through. Oh, it was a lady phoning to postpone. She said she was you, but I recall thinking she sounded different. I requested the call log records. What do you suppose? It wasn't mine. The number wasn't personal. For Elena, it was I was in need more. I so got to work excavating. I asked IT at work to track the strange emails. Not from my account, were they? They came from a phony account registered under my name. And when we followed the IP, Elena's home. And then comes the last blow. At last, Paul's supervisor sent the voicemail from the worried party, who had advised them Paul was soon to be completely bankrupt. And there it was, her vocals. So here we were. During my baby's shower, Paul had ignored Elena's remarks, and now he was leafing through pages of data. From his face, the color faded. His hands quipped, his whole manner then altered. Pure wrath in his eyes, he turned to Elena. "Elena, what is the actual F** this?" The whole room was absolutely quiet. She attempted to act stupid. I didn't let her continue. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You don't know what I mean? You failed to identify the emails you sent to my doctor, passing for me? You seem to forget scheduling fictitious appointments and canceling my actual ones? You remember phoning Paul's place of employment and informing them he was about to unleash a financial catastrophe?" Her mouth moved like a fish, opening and closing. "You have been working to undermine my pregnancy. Would you want me to drop this baby?" Paul's teeth tightened. He was breathing hard, as if he were trying not to lose it in front of everyone. "Tell me this is untrue," he replied, voice dangerously low. Elena's gaze flew around as if she were seeking a getaway. She tried changing strategies. "Paul, I was only guiding you. You have no idea what you are signing for." He tapped his hand on the table, this infant, rigid, stop. Chatting, she winced. Elena gasped. She turned from me and snatched you. Like I was the villain, she pointed at me. She brought everything down. There were plans, Paul. We were meant to be traveling to launch a company, not here. I fixed her with a glance. How? The hell is Elena? What are you talking about? My voice trembling, I asked. Paul's countenance clouded. You said we shared a life? Elena began to really nasty weep. I only wanted you to find pleasure. You were meant to be exceptional. Not some dull man raising a child. Her life is being destroyed by you. Don't you find that? Everybody else was observing. Nobody relocated. Paul eventually spoke. You have a sickness. Elena shot forward, snatching his arm. Paul, please. I did that for your benefit. You may still go. This is something we can correct. He jerked his arm away like he had been scorched. Dead to me is your state. She stopped. Get away. She moved nothing, her face contorted with wrath now, but she had nowhere to go. Nobody backed her. Nobody urged Paul to cool down. She was gone. Then she dashed out the door. The house became silent, too quiet. Paul had not talked since Elena bolted out. He only sat there, bent over the stack of data, clutching the pages so tightly that his knuckles were white. Standing behind the kitchen island, my best friend Melanie had her lips tightly closed and her arms folded. As my mother was gathering the leftover decorations, she murmured under her breath about how some people need treatment. I ran, not sure what to say. In what way might I say? Paul had just learned that, believing she was rescuing him, his own sister had attempted to undermine his work, my pregnancy, and our whole future. At last, he disturbed the stillness. She hasn't done. I went to him. What does this mean? He glanced up, his face blank, but his eyes had something I could not identify. One is afraid. Frustration? She is not simply going to go. And deep down, I realized he was correct. It began little. I woke up the following morning to a text from a number I didn't know. Make the most of it while it lasts. No appellation. No background. I looked at it for exactly 1 minute before presenting Paul. He groaned, glanced at it, then flung his phone on the sofa. She is angry. My mother gave me a call that afternoon. Have you erased your baby register? Not exactly. Indeed, it is gone. I brought it up on my phone. She made sense. The entire thing has been deleted. Many hours later, Melanie texted me. On Instagram, did you block me? I hadn't heard. But when I checked, my account was gone, completely erased. Paul was pacing now. She's attempting to make you vanish. And he was correct. By the following morning, things intensified. Paul's boss called. Hey, dude, I hate to ask this, but did you cheat on your wife? Paul almost spilled his coffee. What? We received an anonymous email with screenshots of some problematic messages. Just wanted to warn you. Paul requested to see them. And sure enough, someone had edited a false chat between him and some random lady, making it appear like he had been snooping about. It was shoddy work, but it didn't matter. The harm was done. Then, the police showed up. A wellness check. We received a complaint that a pregnant lady at this location was being assaulted. I almost choked. Paul froze. Excuse me? The policeman seemed uneasy. The caller was obviously anxious. Said you were stuck, that your spouse was domineering and harmful. I couldn't believe it. Elena had called the cops on my husband. It took half an hour to persuade them that everything was all right. When they departed, Paul sat down at the kitchen table and buried his head in his hands. She's losing it. And then, the last straw. 2 weeks later, I had a normal checkup. I was in the waiting area looking through a magazine when a nurse strolled up. Mrs. Carter? Your husband called. He claimed he'll be here in 5 minutes. I blinked. My hubby. Paul wasn't arriving. He was at work. The nurse nodded. Yes, he wanted us to wait before bringing you back. Said he wants to be present for the ultrasound. Chills rushed down my spine. I need to make a call. I got outside and quickly phoned Paul. Hey, sweetie, what's up? Did you contact the hospital? What? No. Why? I turned and gazed through the glass doors. A lady was standing near the front desk talking to the nurse. Elena. She was here. I stepped back in, heart hammering. Elena. She turned, surprised. Then she grinned. Oh, I was just checking in on you. Lies. I looked at the nurse. What did she tell you? The nurse hesitated. She stated she was your emergency contact. I felt like I was going to get ill. Paul's voice was still on the phone in my hand. I placed it on speaker. Elena, get the heck out of there! Her grin faltered. Paul, you're overreacting. No, I'm done. You attempted to cancel her appointments. You attempted to get me fired. You called the police on me, and now you're showing up at her hospital. The nurse was now gazing at Elena with mistrust. Ma'am, you're not listed as her emergency contact. Elena's cheeks grew crimson. I only wanted to assist. The nurse frowned. You need to go. Elena scowled at me. You're destroying him! No, I said. You are? She stormed out. The nurse looked to me wide-eyed. Do you wish to change your emergency contact? I nodded. Yes, and kindly add a notation in my file. Do not let her approach me again. After Elena was booted out of the hospital, I figured she'd back off. I hoped maybe, just maybe, she'd understand she'd lost. But some folks, they don't know when to stop. A week later, I woke up to sirens outside our home. I flung the blanket off, my heart thumping. Through the glass, I noticed flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the pavement. Paul was already at the door, opening it before they could knock. Sir, walk outside. Two policemen stood there, serious as heck. Paul blinked. What's going on? One cop sighed. We got a tip that you've been breaking a restraining order. I froze. Restraining order? Paul and I glanced at each other. That's not conceivable, he replied. But the officer took out a paper. A restraining order. Against Paul. Filed by Elena. She had said Paul was stalking her, threatening her, even standing outside her home at night, watching her windows. She supplied surveillance video, one officer stated. Paul laughed harshly. That's impossible. I don't go anywhere near her place. But then it struck me. Elena had security cameras, which means she staged it. Paul's hands clenched into fists. Where's the footage? The policeman paused. It's blurry, but she swore it was you. I stepped forward. Did she submit it digitally? Yes! What time was the video taken? The officer examined his notes. 2:07 a.m. last Tuesday. I grinned. We have security cameras too. Want to check? Paul put up our own film from that night. It displayed our home, our bedroom window dark and silent. At precisely 2:47 a.m., Paul was sleeping in bed. With me right close to him, one of the cops breathed sharply. Well, that's interesting. His buddy was already on his radio. Dispatch, we're going to need to follow up on that report. 5 minutes later, they were gone. And Elena, she was going to have a really horrible day. The following morning, Paul received a call from the same officers. Just letting you know, she's been arrested for making a fraudulent police complaint. I had to sit down. Wait, what? Yeah. Turns out the security footage she provided, it was modified. Her own neighbors have Ring cameras and they captured her arranging the entire incident. She was outside in a hoodie, pretending to be you. Paul let out a big sigh. Jesus. Then the officer said, almost as an afterthought, oh, and one more thing. You may wish to verify your credit cards. My stomach sank. Why? Because Elena attempted to establish a loan in your name last week. I raced to my laptop, entered into our bank account, and bang, there it was. An application for a $15,000 personal loan, filed under Paul's name, using his social security number. And the bank? They had classified it as suspicious since the phone number mentioned was not ours. Paul sat down hard in the chair. She's absolutely nuts. I could feel my pulse in my temples. She had attempted to frame him, tried to have him fired, tried to turn the cops against him. And now? She was attempting to destroy us financially. That was it. We were done playing defense. Paul did something I never anticipated. He called Elena's fiancé, Joshua, the unfortunate man who had been pulled into her nightmarish world. Joshua grabbed up on the second ring. Hey, Paul. Paul didn't spend time. Do you know where Elena is right now? Joshua paused. No? She stated she was out doing errands. Paul leaned back. She's in prison. Silence. Then what? Paul patiently explained everything. The fraud. The restraining order fraud. The financial disaster she sought to create. Joshua listened. Didn't utter a thing. Then, in the softest voice, he pleaded, "Can you email me proof?" Paul sent everything, and a few hours later, Elena's whole world began disintegrating. By that evening, Joshua had broken off the engagement, told her parents everything, filed a restraining order of his own. Elena arrived home to an empty house. Her bags, packed and waiting on the porch. Her fiancé, gone. Her family, done with her. Her credit, destroyed. And when she attempted to text Paul, he obstructed her. After weeks of court wrangling, Elena pled guilty to submitting a fake police complaint and fraud. She evaded prison time, but she received a criminal record. Thousands in penalties, an obligatory psychological assessment. Last we heard, she relocated out of state. No one misses her. Paul retained his job. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. And we relocated to a new home. No more Elena, no more drama. Just peace. And we have no regrets. Not a single one for a long following Elena's incarceration and her fiancé abandoning her. Things remained calm. Too quiet. Paul and I tried to move on, concentrate on the baby, focus on our life. But we both knew something. She wasn't done. Then, 3 weeks later, we received the text. "Elena, meet me at Mom and Dad's place." Now. Paul gazed at it. His jaw stiffened. She wants a last showdown. I hesitated. Maybe we should ignore her. "No," he said. "If we don't terminate this now, she'll never stop." And I knew he was correct. So we went. We drew up to Paul's parents' home. Elena was already waiting outside, pacing. Her face was pallid, her eyes wild. Inside, the entire family was present. Paul's mom, his dad, his brother, a few aunts and uncles. They all knew what had transpired, and nobody was on her side anymore. Elena stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, lips squeezed together. The instant we went in, she let free. "Are you happy?" Paul didn't blink. "Define happy." "You wrecked my life." I laughed, harsh and humorless. "Oh, you accomplished it all by yourself." She turned on me. "You snatched my brother from me. You turned him against me." Paul walked forward. "Elena, stop. No. You don't get to tell me to stop. Not after what you did." She grabbed her phone, brought up a bank account statement, and pushed it in Paul's face. "Do you notice this? Do you notice this? I have nothing. I lost everything due of you." Paul glanced at her like she was a stranger. "You lost everything because you sought to harm my family." Her breathing was unsteady. "I was attempting to protect you." Paul's voice cracked. "From what, Elena? From my wife? From my kid?" She flinched. For the first time, I noticed something in her face, something resembling uncertainty. Paul shook his head. "You can't control me. You never could. And you sure as hell can't control my family." His mother, who had remained quiet this whole time, suddenly spoke. "Elena, why? Just why?" The entire room was gazing at her now. She seemed stuck. Her eyes darted about like she was trying to find an explanation. And then she broke. "Because I was supposed to be the one who took care of him." Silence. Dead quiet. She gazed at Paul, eyes flashing with something between wrath and despair. "I was supposed to be the one you needed, not her." I felt cold slither up my spine. Paul looked like he had been hit in the belly. "Elena, I was never your duty." She shook her head forcefully. "No, you don't understand. I spent my entire life protecting you. Mom and Dad constantly placed everything on me. I was the one who kept you safe. I was the one who made sure nobody injured you. And then she comes along." She pointed at me, tears running down her cheeks now. "And suddenly, I don't matter anymore." I noticed it then. This wasn't about me. Not really. Elena wasn't only controlling. She was lost. Paul exhaled shakily. "I adore you, Elena. I always will. But you don't own me." She started to cough and choked. "Without you, I don't know who I am." And I sensed something I never would have anticipated for her for the first time. Empathy. Tears in her own eyes, Paul's mother walked forward. "Our daughter is you. You're Elena. You still need assistance, however. And before it's too late, you must quit harming others." Elena glanced at each of us, from her parents, at her brother's house, at the household she had fled, and she looked humiliated for the first time, maybe ever. That day, Elena did not apologize. She left only walking. She stopped battling, however. The cop's case progressed. She was ordered rehabilitation and sentenced to community service. Ex-fiancé Joshua never communicated with her once again. She relocated to yet another city, cut off practically everyone's contact, and, to the best of knowledge, she is still discovering her identity. Paul and I settled into a new home, starting over. Elena left our life behind. We are also free, first in a long time. There is not a dramatic conclusion, no ideal conclusion. Just tranquilly, and that's all we have ever wanted after everything.